Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hey, all you porcupines, it is me again, your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you for episode 43 of the Porcupine Report. For those who are watching and not just listening, you will notice that I am back in my normal digs at my office in New Hampshire. I got back from a week-long trip to Texas, which for all their reputation of being so freedom-loving, they only rank number 17 on the Freedom in the 50 States Index, with, of course, New Hampshire ranking number 1. So glad to be here to breathe the free air. And I left my cowboy hat sitting in my closet. I figure, I don't know if I'm going to bust out that cowboy hat in New Hampshire. It feels like a good Texas thing to wear. I don't know if I can pull it off in New Hampshire. But anyway. But glad to be here. I'm actually tomorrow. I'm only back briefly because tomorrow I'm hitting the skies again and flying to Tennessee. I'm not sure where they rank on the Freedom in the 50 States Index. I'll have to look that up. But I'm going to a conference being hosted by Young Americans for Liberty for their Liberty Legislator Coalition, the Hazlitt Coalition. Now they've got over 420. I'm sure it's actually a larger number than 420, but they told me at least 420. And boy, I think that would be such a poetic number to end on. So I'm going to say at least 420 Liberty legislators elected to state capitals around the country now. Boy, I remember 10 years ago when maybe there were 24, if you were counting very generously. Over 400 now, 420 plus at this point in time. And of course, the numbers are skewed a little bit because about a quarter of those are in New Hampshire, where we now have 98 Liberty legislators elected, 93 in the House, 5 in the Senate, as we heard on last week's episode with Michael Granger of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. Things are going well in the state capitals for Liberty, but nowhere more than in New Hampshire. So that's very exciting. Looking forward to this conference, connecting with Liberty legislators around the country, hearing about the different efforts happening in state capitals to pass Liberty policy and to nullify the unconstitutional laws coming out of the Imperial City. So that's going to be great. And I'm looking forward to, on a future broadcast, having Sean Tima, the Chief Operating Officer of Young Americans for Liberty, back on the show to continue our What Just Happened series. We did What Just Happened on the national level with Jack Hunter, What Just Happened in New Hampshire with Michael Granger last week. I'd like to do a What Just Happened across all of the states with Sean Tima in the near future. So look out for that, because there's a lot of great news coming out of so many state capitals. But of course, New Hampshire is always leading the way. All right. So those are some things some housekeeping stuff to get out of the way. I will also mention, as always, we are in fundraising season for nonprofits, including the Free State Project, and we are continuing on through the end of the year. We have a generous donor who has pledged $90,000 to the Free State Project that he will match dollar for dollar every donation that comes in. We are just over a third of the way to our goal. We've raised over, we're over 35,000 now raised. We're trying to get to 90 so we can get the full match. So if you are looking for your favorite charitable nonprofit organizations to patronize as you're heading into the end of the year, please keep the Free State Project on your list and go to fsp.org/give. We greatly appreciate it. It helps support all of our programs as we recruit and welcome libertarian builders of free societies to concentrate right here in New Hampshire and create the freest society of all, as so many have been doing for the last 20 years, and we continue doing as we move forward into the second generation. So, all right, now let's hop into our conversation we're going to have today. I'm actually this is someone I've been thinking about having on the show for quite a while, and I'm glad that we could finally make it work out. Her name is Bonnie Freeman, and if you don't know Bonnie is a Free Stater herself. We'll talk a little bit about her story, how she moved and came to the free state of New Hampshire. She is the current host of Free Talk Live, which is an iconic radio program, and I guess they're doing podcasting now too, from New Hampshire. I know so many people who were turned on to the Liberty movement by Free Talk Live, including my friend who's been a past guest on this program, Glenn Jacobs, who was the you also might know as Kane. He was the WWE superstar Kane, and he's now the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, as a libertarian Republican who can both body slam you and quote Murray Rothbard at the same time. I always remember he told me, I think on this program, that his kind of libertarian conversion story was listening to Free Talk Live sometime over the last 2 decades. So a major impact that this program has had, and Bonnie is now hosting that. But she's hosting that for somewhat sad reasons, in that the one of the great originators of that program, Ian Freeman, her husband, is currently serving an 8-year federal sentence for supposed crimes related to operating a Bitcoin. I'm not sure the exact terminology we want to use, but for using cryptocurrency and helping other people access Bitcoin. We're going to be talking about that and the ongoing effort to, there's a petition drive right now, an ongoing effort to secure a pardon or clemency from the President of the United States for Ian Freeman. And of course, the incoming president is someone who has certainly pledged to free Ross Ulbricht, a great hero of the Liberty movement, who is also in jail for cryptocurrency offenses that shouldn't really be offenses or crimes whatsoever. And he's talked about pardons and clemency for other potential individuals. So we're going to talk about the effort to make sure that Ian Freeman is on the radar and on that list. So let's welcome to the show, Bonnie Freeman. Welcome to the Porcupine Report.
Thank you for having me.
I hope I did the introduction of you and Ian justice. And I guess before we get into everything, if you could tell everyone a little bit more about yourself, your own personal journey. How did you come to the Free State the Free State movement, and how did you come to libertarianism?
Well, I moved to Texas in 2018 because I became a libertarian, and I just thought, like you said, they have a reputation for being freedom-oriented, and they're only mid-pack because they're really low in social liberties. And I looked it up while you were talking because I thought Tennessee was top 5, but they're number 6 now. So for some reason they went down. But
all right, well, I'll have to hold that over the head of Glenn Jacobs when I see him next, because he's in Tennessee and he's not even in the top 5 anymore. Though maybe if he runs for governor, he'll turn that around.
He is great. He's legitimately like 4 of me. He's that big. He is like almost twice as tall as me. It's crazy. But he's such a nice person. He's like a big teddy bear or something.
Yeah.
And we have an ad that plays on Free Talk Live that's his voice saying, Free Talk Live is what brought him to the ideas of liberty, and he was stuck in the left-right paradigm before that. It's really cool.
Awesome.
It's cool that he still owns that instead of like distancing. A lot of people, I think, distance from Free Talk Live because we're like not afraid to say the things that are kind of harsh. I'm gonna move this aside.
Yeah. Well, so you're hosting Free Talk Live now. Can you tell us a little bit more about the history of Free Talk Live and how obviously this has been going on for something like 2 decades, right?
Yeah, 22 years, I think.
Okay, so about as long as the Free State Project.
Yeah, Ian moved as soon as they announced the state, sight unseen. He bought a house and moved here, Ian, my husband, and I didn't meet him until 15 years later. I was in Texas, like I said, and then found out during COVID that it was not like liberty loving at all. Like they tried to make it seem. I feel like a lot of people there want to make it seem like it's Texas, like we do what we want, and during COVID, I lived in San Antonio, like in San Antonio proper, and everything was closed down. There was a cop outside of Walmart's if you wanted to go in, telling you to make sure you had a mask on. My favorite club where I'd go sing karaoke, went in there one time when they finally opened them back up at all, like June 2020. There were cops patrolling inside, making sure people were staying seated and no karaoke. And so I was just like, I have to get out of here. If the Texans are fine with the government closing down their churches, then they're not liberty oriented. You know
Yeah.
that they will let the government do anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
oh,
I
go ahead.
know. I know. You know, I was down in Texas for part of it too. It did get better earlier than some other states, but certainly the governor of Texas had locked down originally just as hard as most other places, and I think he only started lifting that when he saw how popular Ron DeSantis was getting.
Yes, that's
Uh,
what I said.
yeah, and he realized kind of maybe this was not the best path for his future kind of political aspirations to be remembered as a lockdown governor. So he did start to
Yep.
change things, but
Not until 2021 though.
yeah. I remember kind of the early days of it. It was just as kind of authoritarian as I think you would find most many other states. I know that, of course, people say in New Hampshire, you know, not to say that our governor Sununu was a lockdown governor too. Most of them were, but there was something, you know, I wasn't here for it, but people tell me that there was just something about being in community with so many people who didn't give a shit about the lockdowns, or at least didn't respect the authority of the mandates and said, we're going to do what we're going to do. We're going to continue to gather. Versus, I know many people, libertarians spread out around the country, who've just felt socially isolated by, you know, it was partly the mandates, but also partly the mass compliance with these mandates. And if you didn't have communities that saw through it all, you were cut off.
Yep. Whenever I first got here, it was just night and day to me. Like Manchester, there was no mandate at all to wear a mask going in places, so I just never did the whole time I was in Manchester. Keene had mandates, but when you were with other people that were willing to not do it, you could get away with it sometimes. And also, there were restaurants that were fighting it. There was Pho Keene, as in Keene, New Hampshire, great. Really clever name. They're closed now only because like the owner died, but we like respect and appreciate her so much because she gave us a place to meet every week despite no other restaurant being that willing to like say no to the mandates in Keene, New Hampshire specifically. So we could meet like 50 libertarians at once in a restaurant at a time where in California you could probably go to like jail for that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. I mean, the Free Staters in Keene have a long reputation of being some of the more hardcore activists in the Free State movement. I haven't been out to Keene yet, as I've been transitioning into New Hampshire, and I've been trying to meet with a lot of the different Free State tribes. So I do need to get out there at some point. But I know that because of, at least people have told me that because of your husband's activism with cryptocurrency, that Keene really became one of the major hubs for Bitcoin really in the world. Is that an accurate statement? And how would you, what would you say to that?
Yeah, for a while, Keene, New Hampshire was Bitcoin Mecca, had the most businesses per capita accepting Bitcoin. And you would even hear some other cities and places claiming to be very Bitcoin friendly. And then if you went there, you couldn't actually spend it. There were just like vending machines like in some places, a really big deal. I mean, like, that is kind of a big deal, but
Yeah.
doesn't make it as like even in competition for how Keene was. But after the FBI broke down our front door and I think 5 other properties all at once, maybe even like 8, including some businesses where they went and ripped out vending machines from the ground. Um, there was a chilling effect, I would say, and a lot of people just really distanced themselves, like because I don't really blame them because business owners shouldn't have to be activists. They weren't really being activists when Ian first got them to start accepting cryptocurrency, it was just like, hey, this is something that could potentially help you. And there were business owners that have shared with Ian that that was one of the best business moves, and like thanked him for, getting them into it at all. But once it became like it was going to be like activism, I don't really blame a bunch of business owners for stepping back. It's only like the bravest of the brave, like that owner of fucking great that yeah, you have to say it slow on the radio, so I have to say it like that, or like that's how I'm trained to say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't really blame business owners for not wanting to be activists. I don't think that there's a Bitcoin vending machine anywhere in Keene right now. The other place where a chilling effect kind of occurred was people started realizing, like, even if they had the operating a money license transmitting a license, even if they had that, they started to feel like, oh, you'll never even know how they're going to interpret different laws, so I'm just going to sell my vending machines. I know people in New Hampshire, not even just Keene, that have sold their vending machine business because you can't even keep up with how the forget what they're called, the FinCEN is going to apply their rules, or how they determine that their rules are at all this week.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a bit, because we definitely want to talk about the case and kind of what happened, and make sure folks have kind of the context of things. So I know that, first of all, obviously there have been a number of high profile cases of individuals involved in promoting cryptocurrency and Bitcoin that have been targeted by the federal government. Ross Ulbricht is perhaps the most famous case, and even got to a point where, as a candidate for president this go around, Donald Trump his specific promise to libertarians was that if libertarians voted for him, that he would free Ross Ulbricht on day one. I don't know if that's a pardon or a commutation with time served, whatever, as long as he's kind of reunited with his family and his mother. That's the most important thing. But of course, he's not the only one. There have been a number of individuals. Another individual is getting a lot of attention is Roger Ver, who's been targeted and is currently in jail for cryptocurrency. Your husband, Ian Freeman, and I think, and I know there's a moniker that was called the Crypto Six of people who were targeted. I think many of them were free staters. I know Aria, who was one of the hosts on Free Talk Live in the past. I think I remember her telling me at PorcFest that, I always remember in Keene, New Hampshire, this great documentary that came out of activism that people were doing against Keene getting a tank for their police department, and it was like they were getting a Bearcat, and I always remember, I thought it was such a clever slogan that they had a chant, "Thanks, but no tanks." And I remember her telling me at PorcFest that they literally brought that Bearcat with them when they arrested her, like probably as an extra FU for some of the activism that she has been engaged with in protesting some of the tyrannical policies there. But what could you tell us a little bit more, I guess, the Crypto Six in general, like what is this, who was targeted, and then we can talk a little bit more specifically about Ian in his case.
The Crypto Six were 5 free staters and 1 local that married a free stater, and they were all the 6 people indicted originally when Ian got arrested, and all 6 of them were arrested that day, but 4 were got out on bail that day, and then Ian was in jail for 69 days, and then a man who changed his name to Nobody. So Nobody was
Nobody.
Yeah, he was in jail for like 6 months because of really free speech. He like said something in anger over the jail phones, and they were like, now we think he's too dangerous to let go. And it was not like an actual threat or anything like that. They just punished him. And the judge, when he ultimately ruled to let Nobody out, he said he thinks it's possible that this might have been illegal, that they were holding him for 6 months. It's like, oh, thank you so much for 6 months later deciding that and letting him out.
Yeah.
That was the judge that was ultimately like the judge in their case. And I always feel like he was trying his hardest to look like I'm fair and don't turn into a mob and come to my door, free staters, because I'm fair. Not that free staters would do that, but that's how these psychopaths think. Like they're always like in fear mindset and like what they would do if they had power, like makes them think badly of everyone else. But anyways, so the 6 people were arrested, 4 got let out that day, and then everything was on Zoom at these days. It was March 16th, 2021 was the day that they brought the Bearcats to my house. They broke open my doors with them. I think there are 2. Because or either there's 2 or they used the same one to like sit in my yard when they're pulling me outside and go break the windows and doors on both sides. I just when you're being woken up to an explosion, don't have your glasses on, naked, don't have your are being told to put your dog down into a pile of glass and men pointing guns at you. My memory is so messed up from like that day. I always thought there were 2 Bearcats, but some people have told me there's only 1. But yeah. The protest you're talking about where they originally decided to bring Bearcats, which is like ballistic, something armored, something, I don't remember what it stands for. It's a tank with like a gun on it and everything. They attached some kind of attachment to it that was basically like a battering ram, but you just push your tank forward. They broke my wall with that and my windows and front door and door on the other side because it's a duplex, and the other side is where nobody was renting a room and living. So that's why they broke both sides.
So it sounds like they came in with overwhelming force that is shocking to hear about. I mean, frankly, in a free society, except I mean, maybe you could understand this in the case of like a criminal drug kingpin who's like, or someone who's being accused of serious
like
violent
children kidnapped in the basement or something.
Yeah.
They have to free. Yeah.
So I guess I should ask, like, as far as I read, there was no charges of any violent crime or anything, or really anything that it's even clear that there was a victim of any of the charges that they brought against Ian. What justifies such overwhelming, police brutality in breaking into your home like this?
I don't think anything justifies it. They could have knocked on the door at 12 p.m. and said, "Hey, Ian, you're getting served. You need to come to court. You didn't have a license to operate a money transmitting business, so you're going to have to come to court." And he would have came to court. He wouldn't have fled. He wouldn't have attacked someone. They tried to say this was their reasoning for keeping him in jail, at least. I don't think they ever have to give their reasoning for sending 60 officers to a house in a quiet neighborhood. That's just my house too. They broke into the house of Renee and Andy Spinola in Derry, and then Aria's house also in Keene, and then Colleen and Chris Freeman, and they live in Alstead, and they're like grandparents who just sold some Bitcoin with Ian. All of them were like accused of being in a conspiracy together, and nobody, of course, but that's the same house as mine. I don't think anything justifies it. We put a video of the raid because we have cameras on our house, and they gave it to us, and they gave our cameras back, so it wasn't like part of the discovery, like the actual cameras video until we put it in. But so we were able to put it up on the internet. So if anybody wants to see the raid, you can go to Free Keen's channel on Odyssey or YouTube and just look up like raid and Free Keen, and you'll be able to find it. We put like USSR music to it, and it's really funny actually. But you can see like my dog wandering around the street, like in pitch black darkness, scared, and like there's all these trucks moving around. And I was just like, "Hey, can I just pick him up? Am I under arrest? Am I being detained?" All this stuff, and they were just saying stuff like, "You're being restrained until we can make sure that there's nothing in the house that's going to hurt us. And I was like, well, we don't booby trap our house, you know? So yeah, I don't think anything makes it okay. And in court, they even lied. They said that they yelled out a warning, which is like part of their own rules. They're supposed to do that before they throw a flashbang grenade. And we have the footage. There's not even any indication of anybody like opening their mouth before throwing it. Like, and then they claimed in court that they did, and that the lady was like, and I'm insulted that you would even the lady being the head FBI agent at the time, in court on the stand, she said, I'm insulted that anyone would even insinuate that we would do something wrong. I only work with the most honest FBI agents, and the whole room like erupted with laughter, and the judge laughed or yelled at us, not laughed at us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am. Yeah, only the most honest FBI agents. That's a pretty low bar.
Yeah, that's true.
So now I know that ultimately 4 charges were Ian was convicted of.
I think it was 7, but then the judge dropped 1 after the jury had convicted him on it. There we go.
Yeah. But I guess leading up to that, I was in preparing for this conversation. I went to the freeiannow.org website where the petition is that people can sign. But there's also a lot of information there, including a wonderful piece, very detailed, by Jacob Hornberger in 3 parts, kind of outlining a lot of the details of this, and a good conversation he had on the Kim Iverson show, which is very informative for the folks who want to learn more. That's all at freeiannow.org. What was one thing that was very interesting to learn about was the IRS agent who tried to entrap Ian and was misrepresenting himself to Ian. Can you tell us a little bit more about this kind of entrapment effort as a part of the investigation they were doing into him?
Yeah, so one of the ways that Ian sold Bitcoin was on localbitcoins.com. I think that's where he originally got in contact with that guy. The IRS agent that was undercover bought some Bitcoin from Ian on localbitcoins.com, and then there's like a message, you can message each other on there. Well, it's defunct now. They got rid of localbitcoins.com. I think that's related to Ian's case. They just were like, you know what? We're closing down. Sorry. So I think it's part of like the chilling effect. But so the IRS agent messaged Ian and was like, can we move this to Telegram? And then he started buying Bitcoin just kind of directly through Ian. And one day he came to, so during 2020, Ian and other activists in Keene were really active in just meeting, being like coming together and just doing things like even just like hanging out and having a beer in the downtown area of Keene, just because you technically weren't allowed to gather more than 10 people, just like doing anything that was like, hey, we're continuing our lives no matter what kind of things. And so one of those things called a nightcap is what they were calling it. Just a bunch of people hanging out downtown Keene. That IRS undercover agent showed up with calling himself Pavel Pavlovsky or something like that. And he just casually mentioned, like, he had acted like, I'm kind of a freedom-minded individual as well. So I want to come to your meetups. And Ian let him, anybody could come. And then he casually mentioned in front of Ian that he was a heroin dealer. And Ian's like red flag went up. And the next time Pavel Pavlovsky messaged him on Telegram to ask to buy more Bitcoin, he told him, no, I'm not going to sell any more Bitcoin to you. You told me you were a heroin dealer, and although I'm not against the war on drugs, that could make me be, that could mean I would be doing money laundering if I sold Bitcoin to you, so we can't sell Bitcoin to you anymore. Like, that should be like, oh, well, we tried. It's over now, right? The investigation. But he went to another meetup at Taco Biondo in Hillsboro, I think it is. And he was wearing a camera, so there's like a video of this that was played in the trial, and he said to Ian, "Hey, mind if I go to your Bitcoin vending machine it was like 20 miles away?" And Ian said, "I can't tell you that you can do that." And he was just like, "Oh," and he was like trying to get Ian to say, "Yeah, sure, man, go use the vending machine." But Ian said, "Nope, I can't tell you can do that." He like knew he was a Fed at that point.
Yeah.
And they charged Ian with money laundering for him going to the vending machine anyway without Ian's permission or knowledge and buying more Bitcoin. Not only was it entrapment, I think, but it's just such a stretch. The fact that a jury convicted on that is like, we can't trust juries at all anymore because of the public school system. Like, people are too stupid to be trusted with this.
Yeah, and my understanding from reading the Hornberger piece is that there was a lot of focus in the trial on a few cases where individuals who were the victims of a romance scam, they were like online kind of, elderly, single, lonely individuals who were messaging back and forth with someone somewhere in the world pretending to be, their, I guess, new online romance person. And then saying, "Oh, I mean, maybe like so many scams we've all encounter on the internet these days. Oh, I've come on hard times financially. If you really love me, please go." And sometimes they say, "Will you go like get Xbox gift cards from Walmart?" And it's like, well, that's a little weird. But
and Walmart doesn't get convicted, or their
right.
House broken in by bearcats, or
Right. But in this case, these romance scammers were saying, "Go buy Bitcoin and send it to this wallet." And it sounds like, from what I read, that Ian demonstrated during the trial that there were cases where he did ferret out that these kind of scams were going on and cooperated with law enforcement to try to get these scammers, but that there were some cases where Ian didn't know, there wasn't maybe the tells to pick up that this was happening. And they haven't tracked down and prosecuted the scammers for this, but they went after Ian for
being like a middleman,
yeah,
kind of on accident.
Yeah, basically someone wanted to convert their dollars into Bitcoin and then transfer it to a Bitcoin address. And Ian did what they asked him to do. But they were being scammed by other people. And these cases were brought out at trial and played on people's heartstrings. Is that so I understand that, right?
So Ian had sold to thousands of people. He had a 100% good feedback on local Bitcoins. And the reason it was 100%, even with some people complaining that his requirements were too high, was because there was just enough that like it wasn't even 1%. That's how many people he'd sold to thousands. He sold Bitcoin thousands of times. And not even just including local Bitcoins. Then if you include all the vending machine sales, tons and tons of times. But I think it was 9 people were found from the FBI. They've first raided the house, then brought more charges by looking at Ian's records and looking through and finding people that looked old and contacting them, finding out some were like secretly victims of scams, and then they brought them to court to pretend to be some kind of poor victims, when in reality some of them were actually doing crimes themselves knowingly, and it came out in trial and they weren't in trouble or anything. Like stuff like, well, they maybe were originally a romance scam victim, but then that scammer told them, "Hey, listen, this is what you've been doing. You've been cleaning my money. Now you're gonna do this for me and scam other people." There was like at least 1 or 2 ladies in the trial that were doing that. And so it's not even 1% of his people he sold to were victims of romance scams. And I was with Ian for the last couple months before they raided the house, lived with him, and I would hear him on the phone every day doing his Bitcoin stuff. And there were some people that I know now were those people claiming to be victims. I kind of think they were working with the feds from the beginning, because no one I mean, it seems so odd that an old lady with no ulterior motives would do something like this. So Ian would be on the phone with them and be like, "You're buying Bitcoin for your husband? Okay, I have to ask you, do you know your husband in real life?" And then they'd be like, "Yes, of course I do. Why did you even ask me that?" And they were trying their hardest to convince Ian that they wanted to buy Bitcoin on their own volition, that he should sell it to them. Like, they weren't just being like, "Oh, what if I don't know him, is that a problem? Can you enlighten me?" "Oh, thank you, Sonny. I was being scammed and I didn't know it." Like, there actually was an old lady that was more like that kind of a situation where she got scammed online. Not sure if it was romance scam specifically. And when Ian started to suspect it from talking to her, he looked her up on white pages and found her son, who ended up being a professor in Massachusetts, contacted him. His name is Paul Niwa, and Paul actually testified for Ian in court, saying he's so grateful to Ian, and that's why he took time out of his like busy schedule to come talked to the court, because Ian called him and told him his mom might be getting scammed, and they were able to figure out together. And Ian held the money, and like the scammer was texting him or her like, "Hey, where's the money? I sent you money and I haven't gotten the Bitcoin yet." And she was like, "I don't know. I swear I did it right." But Ian held on to it to give her her money back. So there's just that is one example, but there were other people that he didn't know were getting scammed, but the police found out, and he worked with them. Like this one cop in Austin, Texas, just didn't get subpoenaed in time, but he called Ian one day just to say like, "Hey, I think this person you've been selling Bitcoin to is getting scammed," and they worked together to stop it. And he
Yeah.
has no cop lover.
Yeah. So it sounds like so it sounds like Ian was doing a lot to try to protect people from these kinds of scams.
He was doing more than the banks do, even though they're under the Bank Secrecy Act and they have all the insurance. He just didn't have the paperwork saying, "Oh, that we have the license to do this." Because when a bank teller
Yeah.
lets somebody transfer $10,000 and they end up being scammed, the bank teller isn't responsible because they have the magic piece of paper, even if it was really obvious and the bank teller didn't care to ask enough questions. It was all about him not having a piece of paper that said that he did. And in trial, they had to show the video of them going through like the Ian's files, and Ian's lawyer said, "Why didn't you show us like person A, B, C, or D?" And when they were trying to prove that they weren't just selectively showing the jury old people that looked like they could get taken advantage of, they were like, "Yeah, sure, we'll click on some other ones." And it was like a bunch of young people that showed their birth dates, and one of them was born the same year as me. One of them was younger than me. I'm 28 now. Um, it, there they were selectively going through finding people they thought looked old to show the jury and make the jury seem sad. In fact, the 6 people that got arrested, the Crypto 6, the only one that they let off and didn't even give a jury, they didn't even give a plea deal to, they just let her off, was the 60-year-old grandma. And we always think like that had to be strategic because they didn't want to, they had this idea in their mind, we're going to take it to court and say Ian Freeman scams old ladies, so we can't have this like old lady up on the stand also getting prosecuted.
Yeah, I think it's disturbing to see that kind of the press releases that came out from the U.S. Attorney's Office, following all of this, labeled Ian, as I understand, a fraudster, that he had been committing fraud. But obviously, they never charged him with fraud. That's not
So they did. They charged him with wire fraud. They charged him with 33 charges at first, and they dropped all but 7 before trial. So they dropped all wire fraud.
So they
just couldn't.
So they did these charges. They kind of created a narrative that they couldn't prove.
They still shouldn't be able to call him a fraudster. Sorry, because he didn't get convicted of that at all. He got convicted of money laundering, and then the judge threw it out because it was that weak.
Yeah. And then, as I also understand it, one of the things he was convicted of was like tax evasion. But as I understood what Hornberger was saying, upon upon further inspection, they didn't actually even know. They didn't know if he actually owed any income taxes. This
So
was not.
his lawyer did the kind of like a mic drop in trial where this IRS agent came to you say, hey, look, this is how much he owed, probably like this much money. And then Mark Sisti, Ian's lawyer, went up there and said, well, isn't it possible that Ian didn't know anything? And she was just like, yeah, it's possible. And I'm not joking. The lawyer literally like dropped his paperwork and walked away. Like instead of saying, okay, you're done, it was like a mic drop because she admitted it's just as possible that her guess, oh, he owed $100,000. I don't know exactly the number. He owed $100,000 in taxes. It was just as possible that he owed nothing because it was just a guess.
So he's convicted by a jury on tax evasion for taxes that the IRS does not even know for certain that he actually owes.
Yep, and they never sent him any kind of a letter saying, hey, you might owe taxes, come be in a meeting with us or anything like that. The only correspondence they sent with him to him in 20 years was something in Spanish saying that his last name had been changed or something. Very, very strange.
Yeah. So now let me ask, so he receives 8 years. There's a lot of false narratives flying around about this from the U.S. Attorney General's office. I mean, frankly, it reminds me a little bit in the early days of kind of, and I guess you still see this a little bit in the Ross Ulbricht case when, when I know online when I'll talk about like why Ross Ulbricht should be free, inevitably I get someone who says, yeah, but didn't he try to hire a hitman? It's like, this is completely fake, bogus stories that were like promoted by the government.
And they brought it up in his trial without actually bringing charges against him. So they poisoned his case.
Right. To bias the jury.
Mm-hmm.
So Ian is facing an 8-year sentence that just began this year. So we're looking at another 7+ years if nothing is done here. It certainly seems to me that on these like particular charges, it seems bogus to me, and it certainly does seem to be an indictment of our jury system that you could get convictions on. I mean, tax evasion when they don't even know that any taxes were due in the first place. I mean, this seems fairly absurd to me. There is the petition effort going on at freeiannow.org. What would you tell people about that effort and how they can be of help?
If you just share even the hashtag FreeIanNow on anything like Twitter and also the website freeiannow.org, ask people to sign the petition. When they go to the website, if they have any questions, like, I don't know if I want to sign my name to this thing, well, they can learn all of our side of the story from that website. Because like most things, if you just Google Ian Freeman charges cryptocurrency, you're going to get the government's side on literally the government's websites popping up and also the government's arm of the media, just all the mass media that goes in lockstep with whatever the government says. They do things like they interviewed me after his sentencing and they said they just like talked to me for like 15 minutes and then chopped this one little piece of me saying maybe the jury didn't like that his wife was young. It was just really ridiculous. Like I said, so much more than that. So it's much more intelligent stuff than that.
Yeah.
And they just chop one little piece. It's like they're not even trying to hide that they're really biased. So if you go to freeiannow.org, you can get our side of the story, the whole Jacob Hornberger 3 article series he did on Ian. Whenever I read his article, I was like, was Jacob Hornberger there and I never met him? Because this is so in-depth. And then I found out he just bought the transcripts and read them himself to get all that information.
Well, I certainly hope, I've signed the petition. I certainly hope that members of our audience will go and do that. I mean, now is a real time. There's a real opportunity right now. I mean, look, if we were going into the first term of the Kamala Harris administration, I would say, yeah, tough luck. Like, we'll have to hold out for another 4 years or 8 years and, wait, and then the sentence will be done. But of course, that's almost a whole decade of a man's life gone. We do have an opportunity now on these cases. Donald Trump, when he was running, did promise not just to free Russ Ulbricht, but he talked about being open to additional pardons and commutations for individuals that libertarians were wanted to kind of raise to him. And I certainly think this is a case that if we could kind of get enough support behind and enough kind of signatures on, then we can try to make sure that is on the agenda. I know I've spoken directly with Angela McArdle, the head of the National Libertarian Party, who has taken an interest in this and conversations with you and trying to elevate this case as well.
Yeah, I appreciate her so much. She's done so much for Free Ross too, which I think is probably more valuable than even doing all the things that anyone does as the chair of the Libertarian Party normally.
Yeah, I know Angela was on the show a few weeks back, and
Nice.
certainly she's kind of blazed a controversial trail, but it is hard to see what the Libertarian National Party, speaking on behalf of myself, not the Free State Project, which there are many different thoughts and ideas about politics. So I always want to be clear about that. But certainly it's hard to understand kind of what the Libertarian National Party has accomplished in recent past elections, certainly in presidential races, but it seems like there may be some tangible policy victories here, or at least freeing some of our political prisoners, which, if that's what we can get, let's take that and let's get freedom for some people who shouldn't be behind bars.
If you free some of the most effective activists, you're just having an effect like more effect than just that, their happiness or something.
Right. These are folks who are who have ripple effects for the whole cause. And I guess let me ask about that. So I guess going back to, obviously there's been this period of time, particularly as like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin was emerging on the scene, that this is where we saw a lot of these prosecutions kind of originate, where the federal government seemed very terrified by what kind of Bitcoin potentially represented to their control of the monetary system. I think that there are certainly some elements of the federal government who seem to be making peace with that a little bit, at least on the Republican side of the aisle, maybe because it's received such widespread adoption that they just understand that there's a political constituency here that now...
No stopping it too. Like if you can't stop it, join it.
Yeah. What was it for Ian that... obviously he was one of the early adopters and early advocates, and this got him into this spot where he was persecuted for this. What was the potential that Ian saw in Bitcoin that made him such an early advocate for it and proselytizer for folks to adopt it?
So he didn't see the vision immediately. The first time he ever heard of Bitcoin, somebody from Australia called Free Talk Live in like 2010, I think, or 2009. Well, I think it was 2010, to say, hey, have you heard of this thing called Bitcoin? I'm kind of into it. I think that this is a good thing for like, it can be used for like freedom. And Ian was like, it's not backed by anything. I don't know, man. And then Roger Ver was a sponsor and listener to Free Talk Live. He heard that call, and then he arranged a meeting with Ian and Mark Edgington being the other co-host, like main co-host, originating co-host of Free Talk Live. So Roger Ver had a meeting with him and said, listen, I want you guys to take my sponsorship payments in Bitcoin. And Ian was like, I don't know if I'm convinced, but I kind of see the vision now. I'll take 10%. And if he would have taken 100%, he'd have 10 times more Bitcoin. But, he didn't he wasn't all the way sold, but Roger Ver was. And so I think that's why Ian is Bitcoin God, because he showed Bitcoin's Bitcoin Jesus.
Yeah.
But really, Roger Ver got him into it.
All right. So and Roger also finds himself on the other end of
crazy charges, like so messed up.
Yeah.
Oh, you paid your exit tax in the amount that we agreed to, but now we changed our mind.
Yeah, I mean, this seems to be, I think, one of the most insidious things about kind of the operating environment for cryptocurrency over the last 10 years is like this, like it's almost like the strategic ambiguity that we've had with like our policy with like Taiwan. It's like we tell China, like, if you act on Taiwan, we might do something, we might not. We're not going to tell you exactly what we're going to do, and that maybe that makes sense in terms of foreign policy, but that should not be how our government operates with its own citizens.
Yeah, when they were attacking library, Jeremy Kaufman's program, what is it called, protocol for Odyssey?
Yeah.
Well, the FinCEN came out and said, well, we aren't going to come out and say exactly how we view each of our rules, because then people will know how to get around them. So basically, we're going to purposely make the rules ambiguous so that way we can say somebody broke the rule no matter what they do.
Right. And that's and I think they call that anarcho-tyranny, right? When the law exists, but it is so deliberately ambiguous and vague that the people in power can basically go after whoever they want to for any pretext they have, because it's almost better. I'm trying to remember where I remember reading this. Maybe it was F.A. Hayek who said, it's almost better, or maybe it is better, to have a tyrannical law that is repugnant but clear, right? Because we can plan our lives and operate around avoiding infracting against that.
Yeah, but, like if you read Counter Economics by Kronkin, he tells example after example after example after example of people in like the worst communism, tyranny, and how they were getting around it and like doing free market, black market stuff. It's just, it blows your mind. Example after example after example. It's like the laws were as tyrannical as they could possibly get, but people find a way to get around it, but not when it's ambiguous.
Right. If the laws are clear, even if they are unjust, you can build around it. But if it's just a wide net of ambiguity that anyone who tries to do anything in the crypto space doesn't know whether they're going to be prosecuted or not, because they haven't told you what's legal and what's not legal, and it's basically they're going to decide after the fact. I mean, that's the worst system of all. And certainly, I think what so many from Ross to Ian to Roger and others have found themselves the targets of. And I certainly hope that we will all do what we can to, at very least, sign a petition petitioning for their freedom with this rare window of opportunity we have with an incoming president who has promised to look into pardons and commutations, and is certainly listening at this point to folks in the cryptocurrency space. So freeiannow.org is the website where people can sign the petition and learn more about the case. Any final word you want to share with Bonnie before we wrap up?
Well, I just love Ian so much, and I think he would be honestly doing a lot better in prison. Not that he's not doing really well. He's like a monk. I think he'd be doing even better if it wasn't for the fact that he loves me and our dog and just wants to come home with us. And it's really crazy. There was somebody that just got sentenced the other day who had laundered $10 billion from a cryptocurrency exchange called Bitfinex, and he only got sentenced to 5 years. It's clear that they targeted Ian for being a vocal free speech advocate and liberty lover and advocate on the radio for 20 years. And I just think they were really targeting him for his free speech and his political and his activism.
Well, I appreciate it, Bonnie, and thank you for coming on and talking with us, and especially as the holidays approach and we should all be together with our families. I'm sorry that you and Ian are going to be separated, but hopefully in the new year, if we get the petition numbers up and we can kind of raise this case before the president, maybe next holiday season, the two of you can be together.
Hope so.
All right. Well, thank you, Bonnie. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I appreciate you joining us for episode 43 of the Porcupine Report. As I mentioned, I am jet setting to Tennessee tomorrow for the Young Americans for Liberty Hazlitt Coalition Conference of Legislators. I'm looking forward to connecting with so many liberty legislators around the country who are working to advance freedom in their own individual states. Maybe I'll have something to report back on next week from that. And I just want to mention again, fundraising season for the FSP and all your favorite nonprofits. We've got $90,000 in matching funds we'd like to draw down. We're a third of the way there. So if you've thought about contributing to the Free State Project, go to fsp.org. Now is the perfect time to give, and your contribution will be matched dollar for dollar. Your impact will be twice as much, and this will help us invest in programs for the new year, including a more robust pipeline of identifying and recruiting and getting libertarians to visit and move and stay here in New Hampshire. More support for more community events. We've got our big ones, of course, every single year, the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and Pork Fest. By the way, tickets are on sale for both right now. We'd also love to be able to do some more smaller events throughout the year to help bring people in to visit the state, and more content creation like this show. If we reach our fundraising goals for the year, there's a lot we would love to be able to invest in to grow our programs for next year. So now is the time that I really am asking you to consider making a contribution. And also, I'm looking forward to, we are developing some really great benefits for those who contribute to the FSP. We'll be rolling those out in the near future. But those are in development. I'll look forward to telling you more soon. So that's fsp.org/give. And of course, one final reminder to also go to freeiannow.org. And if you are willing, please go sign the petition and help us get those numbers up. And I think that's what I've got. So, all right, everyone, thanks for tuning in. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.